Greetings. I'm reading from the Tao Te Ching in English. I'm using the published Practicing the Tao Te Ching 81 Steps on the Way by Solala Towler. Here's my book, and I'm reading step 16 right now. I've just finished reading step 15, which was speaking about the sages and them being deep and masters at penetrating the subtle and profound Tao, with many descriptors. Step 16. Allow yourself to become empty. Abide in stillness. The 10,000 beings rise and flourish while the sage watches their return. Though all beings exist in profusion, they all end up returning to their source. Returning to their source is called tranquility. This is called returning to original nature. Original nature is called constant renewal. To understand constant renewal is called Illumination. To not understand constant renewal is to invite disaster. To know the unchanging is to be enlightened. To embrace the eternal is to be all-encompassing. To be all-encompassing leads to the nobility of spirit. To be noble of spirit is to unite with heaven. To unite with heaven leads to union with Tao. To attain union with Tao leads to immortality, living eternally without fear. And that's step 16. I've read through this before and then read various steps along the way, just picking it up, and there's a lot of steps, like you're walking upstairs. The format of to achieve X you have to Y, to Y you have to Z, to Z you have to A, or something similar like that. Allow yourself to become empty. Well, that's the basic, simple, like carrying forward the concept of step 15 and previous. Allow yourself to become empty and abide in stillness. It's really focusing a sense of urgency and importance on stillness and observation. Being and inner, and referring back to step 12, the 5 colors blind the eye, and the 5 tones deafen the ears, and the 5 flavors dull the palate. And it carries on, and then it finally concludes, this is why the sage cares for his inner vision instead of what he sees with his eyes, and hears with his ears, and tastes with his tongue. He lets go of the second, which is the he lets go of the second and chooses with the first, the inner vision. So, focusing with the inner vision on that which the 10,000 beings rise and flourish. Returning to their source is called tranquility. Now here I'm going to itemize all of these. Within the book, there are italicized words, starting with tranquility, right here. Returning to original nature, and then constant renewal. They all end up returning to their source. The source is called tranquility. This is called returning to the original nature, which is constant renewal. The original nature is constant renewal. To understand it is called illumination, which is basically enlightenment. To not understand it is to invite disaster, which is essentially being blind to constant renewal. And to embrace the eternal is to be all-encompassing. To know the unchanging is to be enlightened. To know the unchanging is to be enlightened. If we're going to be understanding that which is unchanging, the thing that is unchanging can be said to be a form of what I seek to interpret as the eternal or absolute truth that underlies all discord and disagreement, everything that is outside of temporal chaos, that which is eternal. I've been seeking that for 18, 20 years. I think this is like getting to the root of the wisdom, the ancient wisdom that is stored in, say, the Tao Te Ching and various writings. I've just recently been recommended something of writing, I can't recall what it's called, Dhamma something from Buddhism, and I also appreciate and I have my original heritage in the Bible and Christianity, but I think it's wise to be able to understand everything that is written over the last 3,000-4,000 years, to understand if one can seek, and this is why I like, I really appreciate Carl Jung, is he was invested in this sort of personal research, the ancient writings and such. So okay, so there's two walking of stairs here. That's what I'm going to call this, or two steps on the path. These are sub-steps. There's tranquility, which is returning to their source, which is also and tranquility is returning to the original source, or the process of returning to their original source is called tranquility. I suppose that might be considered dying, because when one dies, they become tranquil. That's a expressive point. Original nature's constant renewal. Returning to the source. Let's think about that in terms of just inner stillness and inner sight. So you have returning to their original source, which is the inner sight, is tranquility, and it's constant renewal. To understand constant renewal is called illumination. Yeah. If you're going to be illuminated, it's going to be through your understanding and your processing of your external stimuli. The five flavors dull the palate. So if you're constantly taking in stuff and not processing it, you're going to dull your palate, dull yourself. You're going to dull your existence, your sight, dull your hearing. But if you seek to return, achieve tranquility by returning to the original source. This is really interesting. I'm getting a lot out of this one particular thing and thinking with reference to previous steps on the Tao. To understand the unchanging is to be enlightened. To embrace the eternal is to be all-encompassing. To be all-encompassing leads to nobility of spirit. That's kind of nice. That just talks about one's own individual characteristics. To be noble of spirit is to unite with heaven. Interesting. That makes a reference in my mind to what Jesus said many times about bringing the kingdom of heaven. To unite with heaven leads to the union with Tao. Well, Jesus was certainly a master of Tao. To attain union with Tao leads to immortality, living eternally without fear. So I'm going to wrap this up. I've kind of gone over it a couple times, but I really, really like this. Step 16. allow yourself to become empty, abide in stillness. And that's leading into tranquility, original nature, which is constant renewal, and illumination, awareness of eternal things, unchanging, uniting with to become noble and living eternally without fear. Nice.